All right, just a brief bit about myself. My name is Jon Bischke. I'm a 5-time entrepreneur, and I've been in your shoes. I've walked the path just like each one of you. My current company is a company called RG Labs, and we're in stealth mode right now, but what I can say is that we founded the company on the premise that the most important decisions that people make are decisions about people. Who you date, who you marry, who you hire, who you start a company with. So hopefully that is enough to get you intrigued, and we'll be launching in 2012, and you can watch for us then. I feel like a lucky guy today because 20 minutes ago, Sasha was up here, and he was talking about what you believe in. And he challenged everybody in this room to think about what you're most passionate about and what would happen if you were up here on stage and you were talking about it. And actually, that's what I'm going to talk about today. There's 3 things that I'm going to talk about that are near and dear to my heart. The first is education, the second is employment, and the third is entrepreneurship. And what I want to talk about today is how they're deeply interconnected and how critical they are. So I want to kick off today's presentation with a story that's in Dan Pink's book, a fantastic book called A Whole New Mind. He talks about a guy whose name is Gordon McKinsey. And Gordon McKinsey is an executive at Hallmark Cards. And he would visit classrooms. And when he went to those classrooms, he'd mention that he's an artist. And he'd look at the paintings that all of these kids had on the walls. And he'd ask, who did these masterpieces? And then he'd say, how many of you are artists? If you're an artist, raise your hand. And there was a pattern that emerged in each and every classroom that he went to. Kindergartners, when he asked who was an artist, all of them would raise their hand. When he got to second graders, about 3/4 of the kids raised their hand, much less eagerly than the kindergartners. By the time he got to 4th grade, just a few would raise their hand. And by the time he hit 6th grade, not one single child would raise their hand. I want to propose a theory, and that's that what's true about art might also be true about entrepreneurship. It's very possible that we're all born entrepreneurs, that if you told a kindergartner what an entrepreneur is and what an entrepreneur does, that kindergartner might think of themselves as an entrepreneur one day, just the same way that those kindergartners in Mr. McKinsey's class thought of themselves as artists. But something happens. As you go through school and high school and college, very few of us actually become entrepreneurs. Why is that? Well, let's talk a little bit about the differences between how we learn in school and how we learn as entrepreneurs. As entrepreneurs, we learn by doing. Now, this is totally and completely obvious to all of you. We've read books about entrepreneurs, and we've probably, some of us even studied entrepreneurship formally. But I think I speak for everybody in this room when I say that I've learned more, much, much more on the job than I've ever learned in a classroom or than I've ever learned from a book. We learn by doing. Now contrast that to our modern education system. Very little of the learning that takes place in school actually happens by doing. We're usually listening to a lecture, we're reading a book, we're assimilating some information, and we're regurgitating that information for the purposes of an exam. Very, very different from how all each of you learn in your respective businesses. There's another way that we learn as entrepreneurs, and that's by failing. Now, sometimes these are big epic failures, like the aspiring entrepreneur who decided to launch the DVD rewinder. My favorite part is that's actually a Willy Wonka DVD, which is pretty awesome. Most of our failures, though, are not this epic. They're the little failures, the failures to execute. Oftentimes, as entrepreneurs, our failures are failures of omission, not of commission. In fact, I think I'd say that we're penalized much more for those things that we don't do than those things that we do. Now, again, let's think about school. Does school work that way? No, actually, school works just the opposite way. In school, you're penalized for making mistakes. You get something wrong on an exam or on your homework, you get a big red X on your paper. Very, very different from what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And in school, you're never, I don't think ever, penalized for the thing you failed to do that was innovative or out of the box. In fact, if you do something too out of the box, typically you're penalized for that. So it's the exact opposite of how we learn as entrepreneurs. I have a friend who runs one of the fastest growing companies here in Los Angeles, and he likes to say a lot with a huge grin on his face that he's failed more than anybody that he knows. That's so different from school, where we're taught to be embarrassed and ashamed of our failures. And finally, as entrepreneurs, we learn by talking, and this kind of takes at least two forms. The first is, as entrepreneurs, one of the most valuable skills that we develop is our ability to present, our ability to communicate. Now, we've all probably taken a class on speech, and we've had to get up in front of people and speak in school, but as a percentage of the amount of time that you're in school, what percentage of that time are you communicating? Are you presenting? Are you selling? Very small percentage, especially compared to how much of the time you do that as an entrepreneur. Sales, that's a forbidden word in school. We don't learn how to sell in grade school, high school, college, and shockingly, and I went to business school, so I saw this firsthand, you don't learn to sell in business school. So it's no doubt, no wonder that entrepreneurs, when they come out of school, oftentimes they struggle with this. They struggle to present themselves. They struggle to sell to their investors. They struggle to sell their vision to their potential employees. So this is a big difference and a big problem. So at this point, you're kind of asking yourself, well, what does this have to do with me? Why should I care about what's going on? And why schools, if they don't teach entrepreneurship, why is that a big deal to me? And now I want to move to the second thing that I'm very passionate about, and that's employment and jobs. And I don't know how closely you follow the macroeconomic conditions right now, but there's some scary stuff out there. I've seen a lot of nasty charts lately. This one in particular had me worried. It's the average duration in weeks of unemployment in our country. And you can see here that over the course of the last 70 years, pretty much been in the low teens. During the Reagan years, early 80s, we were in a recession. We bumped all the way up to a little over 20. Something changed in 2008. Since 2008, we've gone from the teens to over 40 weeks. What that means is that if you lose your job in America today, you can expect, on average, to be out of work for almost a full year. We've got a crisis in this country, and the simple fact is that we're not creating enough jobs. Well, there's a ray of hope here, and this brings me to the third thing that I'm passionate about, and that's entrepreneurship. It's research by the President's Council on Jobs, others like the Kauffman Foundation, that basically says that all net job creation that's happening right now is happening because of startups. People like you, so you can feel good about that. The most recent report said all net new job creation comes from companies that are less than 5 years old. So it's not the Fortune 5000 companies that are creating jobs today. It's people like you in this room, which is awesome. There's a simple equation here that I like to throw at people, get you thinking. If you have more entrepreneurs, what that's going to lead to is more startups. And if you have more startups, what you're going to end up with is more jobs. And if you believe that somewhat simplistic equation, you also have to believe that the opposite is true. That if there are fewer entrepreneurs, that's going to lead to fewer startups. And if there are fewer startups, we'll have fewer jobs. Now, this is a picture of the soup kitchen lines during the Great Depression, and I'm not up here to tell you that we're in anything nearly as bad as the Great Depression right now, but a number of top economists recently have said that what's on the horizon might be as bad and might even be worse than what we went through in the 1930s. In fact, the New York Times recently ran an article that said, it was entitled, "The Depression, If Only Things Were That Good." Now, if we are on the brink of severe economic turmoil, and I don't know whether we are or not for sure, but if we are, it'll affect everybody in this room. It means less employed people to buy the products and services that you're selling. It means those people who do keep their jobs, they'll have less disposable income because those people will hunker down and prepare for a very uncertain economic future. I'm a big fan of action. I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I want to leave you with 3 actions. The first is read, educate yourself about this intersection of education, employment, and entrepreneurship. I've listed 3 books up here. I'd encourage you to write them down. They're books that have influenced me and helped me to understand more what's going on in our economy. The first is one called The Great Stagnation by economist Tyler Cowen. The second one is a book called That Used to Be Us by Thomas Friedman, who writes for the New York Times, Michael Mendelbaum. And the third is called The Lights in the Tunnel by Martin Ford. That one will scare you. There's a lot of writing about this. There's a lot of articles. There's a lot of books. Figure out what's going on, read some stuff, learn about what's potentially on the horizon. The second action that I would encourage all of us to take is to serve, is to give back to the entrepreneurial community and to pay it forward. Now, I know most of you in this room already do this. That's awesome. I would encourage every one of us, though, to look and see if we can do more. Can you get involved with an organization like the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or NIFTY? They're doing some amazing work at encouraging young people to be entrepreneurial. And yesterday, you got to hear about Startup Weekend. It's a fantastic organization. It's one that I've been personally involved with. It allows people to dip their toes in the pool of what it's like to start a company in 48 hours. I was judged the Startup Weekend competition in San Francisco last weekend, and I was blown away by the energy in the room. I was blown away by the ideas that everyone came up with in 48 hours. So see what you can do to serve, to give back. See if there's a Startup Weekend coming to a city near you. And the final one is to do more of what you're already doing, which is to hire more people. Now, it seems obvious, but I mean it. Get out there, kick some ass, hire some more people. If you're providing jobs to your local economy, you're part of creating that better future. You're part of the solution. Mark Cuban, the billionaire owner of the Dallas Mavericks, had a blog post last month in which he said, the most patriotic thing you can do is to go out there and make a boatload of money. Because if you do that, you'll pay a lot of taxes. And those taxes will help to support people less fortunate than you. I don't disagree with that, but what I'd offer, I'd take it a step further. I'd say the most patriotic thing that you can do is to go out there and create companies that create lots and lots of jobs. Of course, the awesome part is that if you do that, you'll probably make a boatload of money as well. Now, this brings us back to that kindergartner, because I think there's one other duty that we all have, and that's to empower as many people to be entrepreneurs as we can. As entrepreneurs, we've had many people who've helped us along the way. I think it's our duty to give back and to encourage other people to become entrepreneurs. Think back to that kindergartner. By the time he hits 6th grade or high school, will he still have that dream? Will it still be a possibility to own his own business one day? Or will that dream have died? Because if we have more entrepreneurs, if they have coaches, if they have teachers, if they have mentors, we're going to have a larger group of people starting businesses. And if that happens, maybe one day we'll hold Alchemy in Staples Center. If we do that, we'll definitely bring Magic Johnson back for that one. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be at the Rose Bowl. So with that, I want to say thank you to all of you for your time. Thank you to Reza and EO for the incredible work they've done this week. I'm excited by what this is and even more excited about what's to come. Thank you.